Well, it looks like this is the week we finally do the Space Shuttle Type C. I'm not sure how that sounded. Hopefully this sounds a little bit better. But yes, welcome one and all to this video that I'm posting on this channel on another beautiful, magical, magnificent adjective beginning with the word M, or with the letter M. Monday. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the Kerbal Space Program video. In this video, we are going to be using these Space Shuttle Type Cs. We'll be launching 2 Space Shuttle Type C vehicles, and one like Constellation rocket, but there were some issues with that I'll get into later. But we're using these rockets, we're using these launch vehicles to construct the Duna Basecamp, which we will place in orbit of Duna in preparation for the first boots that we will put on the surface of the red planet. And look at that. Look at the SRBs go as we rocket through the upper atmosphere with our first payload, which consists of the main habitation and also scientific module of the Duna Basecamp space station. It has that, and it also has a small solar truss, which is modular, and we can use it to expand the station in the future as we increase the amount of science and other things we are doing on the space station. So yeah, that is what is happening. Right now we are launching that first module into parking orbit of Kerbin. And I say first module, but like this is effectively a single launch station. All the parts of the station are there, or at least all the parts of the station for now are there, attached to this one monolithic structure inside the fairing, which you can now see because the fairing is gone. And all that has to happen is just some quick reconfiguration of the truss segment and also the cupola module. Yeah. And then once that is set up, we're going to, well, I guess we'll get to that when we get to that, but for now we're just going to warp around, finish circularizing, and then we're going to release the payload as the space shuttle Type C kind of starts to tumble away. And now we'll do the aforementioned reconfiguration. And I do notice that docking port is floating above the probe core. I'm not sure why that happened. I might have meant to offset it downwards and grab the probe core in accident rather than the docking port, because that docking port junior is the way that is attached to the body of the station. And of course now we can just slide these around, reconfigure them. So the truss is pointing up. It's got the truss base attached to the hub, and then that first truss segment with these solar arrays will be up there. And we'll extend them out. I believe there's a radiator on that too, and we'll extend that out in a second. Yep, there we go. And now we're ready to deorbit the Type C, because it is a partially reusable vehicle. Now, Matt Lown did an excellent video on the Space Shuttle Type C, which I'll link in the description if for some reason you aren't able to find it. But his design was a sort of boat tail for the engines with a an attachable boat tail, and then the just a space shuttle cargo bay. And instead of doing that, I opted to make mine again like this sort of detachable boat tail. However, instead of just the engines, it also has the probe core, batteries, parachutes, and the payload fairing all up in there. And it also has these little body flaps and small wing strakes that can help it kind of control its descent through the atmosphere. But as you can see, that once it gets into the sort of thicker portions of the atmosphere, it does begin to kind of tumble around wildly out of control. So yeah, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? Because we're using parachutes to land. I'm not sure why that's happening, but it is. It should stop itself once the main chutes open. If we just give it a second, there goes the drogue, and there we are. Main chutes are open, going down nice and stable for a nice splashdown. But yeah, so my design, right, is this sort of detachable boat tail that holds the engines and body flaps and parachutes, probe core, battery, all that stuff. And then it has a 3.75 meter fairing at the front so that it can take just slightly bigger payloads than the actual space shuttle cargo bay can fit. And now this is the Constellation rocket that I very briefly mentioned. If you're wondering why we're starting in space and not on the pad, it's because I launched that rocket and then I forgot to push record on OBS. So I didn't realize I wasn't recording up until this point where we were docking the lander with the space station, and so this is all I have of it. We are going to land this upper stage, sort of Falcon 9 style, because I did realize we had quite a bit of extra Delta V, but I didn't, intend to sort of land this like soft land it in the ocean. I just intended to deorbit and let it crash, but you know, we had the extra fuel, so I figured, why not, since I didn't have very much footage of the rocket, why not make this part a little bit interesting, and, you know, deorbit this and then land it nice and safely in the water for recovery. So yeah, that's what's going to be happening. But with the rocket, right, it was just like a Constellation style rocket, so it was this fairing and upper stage at the top, and then literally just a giant space shuttle launcher. I actually put a picture of the rocket on the screen, like the actual Kerbal Space Program rocket, and then also stick like a picture of the actual real-life concept of the Constellation rocket from NASA. As we can see, we are descending through the atmosphere at high speed. The re-entry gases have just dissipated, and we are coasting towards the ocean. Once we get nice and low, about 1,000 meters, we'll start to burn the engine just to bring ourselves down nice and slow for a soft splashdown in the oceans of Kerbin. Let's watch. Beautiful. Beautiful. We're going to tip it over so that engine is not in the water, and then presumably we'll go get someone from the KSC to go and recover it. And now it is time for the final Shuttle C launch of this video. So this shuttle is carrying kind of a different payload than the other Shuttle Cs were carrying. As I said before, my design for this Shuttle C is the detachable boat tail with the engines, and then, you know, a 3.75 meter fairing at the top. But that is not all that the Shuttle C is capable of taking up. Indeed, it is able to take up these big, sort of Mark III fuel fuselages. You know, the big pieces that people use very often for like nuclear-powered vessels. And it's very useful for bringing those up because it can take up quite a bit of mass. Those things are pretty heavy, all things considered. Those things are pretty heavy, especially when they're full of fuel. But they're also very big. They're very unwieldy. And so it's kind of difficult to make a launch vehicle that sort of looks, you know, realistically plausible and is able to take up such a big payload. But this, well, I mean, I guess realistically plausible, as in this never happened, but like the Space Shuttle Type C was a concept that was looked at by NASA, so I guess it's sort of somewhat realistic. And if they were to take up a payload of this size, I would imagine this is what they would use to bring it up. Of course, if the Shuttle C was ever ended up making it off the drawing board. And I guess it's sort of similar to the Russian space shuttle, you know, the Buran Energia, where Energia was this heavy lift launch vehicle that could take up, like, I think just over 100 tons on its own and launch independently of the actual Buran orbiter. But the Energia's payloads were actually mounted on the side of the rocket rather than on the top as they would be in like a traditional rocket. So yeah, I believe it only ever launched with the Energia once, and then it launched once on its own. And if there's like a video of it that I can find, I guess I'll link it in the description. But yeah, you can see. Or maybe I'll just take a picture of it on the screen right now. You can see that the payload of the Energias were mounted on the side. So I guess it's kind of, you know, something like that. Anyways, I've kind of gone on a ramble, a bit of a tangent, and so, oh geez, screen flashing right there. But I kind of went on a ramble. We just deployed the fairing, and in that fairing was hidden our docking mechanism, some solar panels that will deploy in just a moment. Well, actually no, because we're going to deorbit this boat tail and do the little water landing first, but yeah, it has the docking mechanism, some solar panels, and it was just hidden away in a fairing, just for, I guess, realism, because, I mean, look at this thing, it's already not very super aerodynamic, so I don't think it would have made a huge difference if we had just left it exposed, but like I said, it's more realistic if we have it all covered up, and also just because of how Kerbal Space Program processes things like drag, where, you know, a big blunt fairing isn't, like the fairing base, I mean, won't cause a lot of drag if it is, like, if the fairing, like the node on top of the fairing is blocked. Then it will take basically, the way Kerbal Space Program calculates drag is, so the green attachment nodes, if those are exposed, then you're going to be experiencing more drag. It doesn't really calculate drag based on, well, for certain parts, I mean, but it doesn't. Basically, drag is very heavily influenced by if you have any green nodes exposed, and also the size of the green nodes that are exposed. So if it's like a tiny node at the top of a cubic octagonal strut, it'll be less drag than like the giant node on the top of the Saturn V tank. If you kind of get get what I'm saying. I mean, if you play Kerbal Space Program and pay attention to these things, you'll know. And I believe somebody did a video on it's probably a Strats and Blitz video. If you just go look for like Strats and Blitz videos, it might have been like a mass driver or something like that. Yeah, you'll kind of get the breakdown on what it is that I'm talking about. So with that, we were just kind of doing the rendezvous with the Duna Basecamp. The reason I didn't really have to do very many maneuvers to get to this point is because actually, if we just waited about 8 days in orbit, we would have had a, like, I want to say a intersect within 1 kilometer with the station. And so I decided to just wait the 8 days it would have taken to get to that intersection, and then just, you know, do the lazy thing where you burn retrograde and then burn to the target, repeat until you dock with it. And speaking of docking with it, we have docked with it, and we are now going to wait in orbit for just over a year in order to get lined up for a Duna transfer window, which, if you don't know, if you draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Duna, the angle let's try that again. If you draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Duna, the angle that line forms at the sun should be about 45 degrees. I didn't actually do that method. I just used transfer window planner, which told me to warp to like year 7, day 405, and I overshot that by like a week or so, but it didn't end up mattering because we're professionals. We're just so good at the game. We were able to just launch, and it didn't impact the mission at all. We were able to return, or I guess not return. We were able to make it to our desired orbit around Duna with actually with quite a bit of extra fuel to spare. But I guess that's spoilers, isn't it? I shouldn't have said that because now you know what's going to happen at the end of this video. You have no reason to finish watching it. But regardless, you should finish this video. It's a very good video. I worked very hard on it. And yeah. And there we go. We are now departing from Kerbin. You can see it zooming away as we enter orbit around the sun. Actually, I think we gotta wait a little bit longer before we get into interplanetary space. And there we are. And now we're just going to make a little mid-course correction to fine-tune the approach to Duna. We're gonna put this station into a polar orbit around Duna. And the reason for that is because we want it to be able to pass over every latitude of Duna. Because that way we'll be able to land a lander at any point on Duna, which we want to do for science reasons. No, it's because, you know, we are trying to extract the maximum amount of science from the red planet, and thusly we'll need to perform a landing in every single biome if we wish to do that. And so having a station in a polar orbit is just better for that, because eventually at some point it will pass over every single point on the planet's surface. And so we can pretty easily just, deploy a lander when we're over that, and then perform a landing in that biome, and then go back up, and it'll all be well and good. So yeah, we are now just cruising towards Duna. We performed the mid-course correction. We're about to get to Duna very soon. The time warp actually didn't do that thing where it usually slows down, and we just ended up right in Duna, about 70 kilometers above the surface of Duna. So we'll now perform our deceleration burn. It's actually a pretty cheap burn, all things considered. And yeah, we're now captured at Duna. I think I'm just doing a little bit of fine tuning, just to get the kind of eccentricity just right, because I wanted this to be in a very circular orbit, and we did that. And we're now just going to relocate this sort of booster module, because it did have quite a bit of extra fuel in it. I figured it could just stand by on the station as a sort of fuel depot, just in case it's ever needed by any missions that will visit the station in the future. And we can just deploy the solar panels and the radiators and look at the station drift serenely above the orange surface in preparation for its crew to arrive and perform a landing on the planet in the next episode. And that is going to conclude this episode, in fact. So right now on the screen there are 2 videos. On the left is a video selected for you by YouTube's recommendation algorithm, and on the right is the most recent upload on this channel. I do hope you enjoyed. Links to my main channel are in the description. Please like, please comment, all those nice things. I might be